Rayla heard the sounds of commotion from further up the street. She glanced at the window and saw several men in unfamiliar uniforms marching down on the trees lining the roadway. They wore steel armor lacquered a deep black with a red skull emblazoned across the breastplate. Green bands were wrapped around their arms, each with an intricate Triskelion symbol sewn into the cloth. She had never seen that kind of armor. Alarm bells began ringing throughout the city, alerting her that these men weren't friendly. As soon as the bell sounded, the men broke ranks and several threw torches into various buildings, setting them ablaze in a matter of seconds. Rayla took only a few seconds to leap into the hall before a torch burst into the window and landed on her bed, igniting in a quarter of a second. "Dad!" she yelled, rushing into the adjacent room and slamming a fist against the door. "Come on, we have to get out of here!" Silence. Then she saw it. Smoke, black and foul smelling, trickling under the door. Thinking quickly, Rayla pushed back into her room, holding her sleeve over her mouth and grabbing the coat rack. With a strength born of desperation, Rayla slammed her improvised battering ram into the door, shattering the lock after a series of blows. The door flew open, revealing a room filled with smoke. "Dad!" she yelled, waving a hand in front of her face, trying to clear some of the smoke away. Her eyes watered as she glanced around, trying to find him. Eventually, after stumbling around, searching for her father, her foot knocked against something bony. Bram was on the floor, unconscious, clearly close to asphyxiation. Quickly, Rayla reached down and slung his arm over her shoulders. "Come on!" she coughed, pulling him out of the room and into the hallway. People were screaming all around them, running toward, or screaming all around them, running toward the stairs, trying to escape the rapidly spreading flames. Smoke billowing around her, Rayla pulled her father along with her as she stumbled her way down toward the stairs. Just as she and the other guests entered the relatively unscathed common room, a full squad of crossbowmen burst into the room. They were led by a man and woman wearing green and silver clothes with two pins in the shape of a skull and serpent attached to their collars, their lack of armor making them stand out. That the male source user's clothes was made from rich silk. His boots were the finest leather. Contemptuously, the dark-haired man looked around, head slightly cocked, almost like a sculptor examining a piece of rock that needed to be broken in order to get what he wanted out of it. He had a few tinges of gray in his hair, though he had no lines on his face. A sword was at his side, a utilitarian weapon with a black wolf-head pommel. Despite his fine, almost floppy clothes, he clearly knew how to use that sword. However, considering who he was, that sword was probably the least of his weapons. "Do not be afraid," the woman said firmly. "You will be granted an opportunity. Join us and live. Defy us." She trailed off meaningfully. The man raised his hand and created a fireball over his palm. "All of the men in the room step forward," he commanded. "Now." The woman simply walked toward the crowd, glancing at each of the women in the room. As she did, she pointed at 6 of the women in the crowd, cowering before the 2 Sorovs. Rayla wasn't one of them. "Ignore them. They can't use the source." The man blinked. "That leaves..." His mouth moved as he quietly counted. 8 that can use the source. Rayla flinched back. "No," she thought. "Impossible." The woman motioned to the soldiers. "Take them. Pay special attention to that one." She pointed to Rayla. "She's strong. Very strong. She'll make a fine addition to the Black Hand." "No!" Rayla backed away, holding her father close. "Please, it's not true. I can't." "Silence, child," the woman said quietly but firmly. "You'll have to learn respect for a full Ashlar. At least until you're trained." "Get away from me!" Rayla tried not to look at the frightened looks in the eyes of the people staring at her. She pushed backward. "You're lying!" "Child," the woman sighed. "When I know, I know. My name is Bayora Ul, and you will be my apprentice." She smiled slightly. "I look forward to seeing you become Ashlar eventually." "I'll never come with you!" Rayla screamed, taking a firmer grip on her father and making a run for it. Just as she was about to throw herself out a window, a wall of flame appeared in front of her, sparking from nothing to prevent her from escaping. The woman, Bayora, grinned, eyes sparkling. "You have spirit, child." She flicks her hand. "Gedwin, test the men quickly and take the talented with us." "Yes, Bayora." the male Sora of Gedwin, created a series of fireballs and sent them gliding toward the huddling men. They tried looking away, even closing their eyes, but invisible hands seemed to grab their heads and turn them toward their fireballs. The same invisible fingers pulling their eyes open. For full minutes, they stood frozen still, unable to move. Eventually, Gedwin dismissed the fireballs and pointed towards 6 men. Instantly, they were lifted in the air and pulled forward with ethereal arms. I'm not sure how strong these men can be, he remarked, but they can use the source. Everyone else in the room backed away from the Soras the Soras had chosen as an out, expressions of horrified terror on their faces. Bayora motioned the 7 other women that she had chosen and pulled them out of the crowd with the same invisible prods. We'll need a portal to get us out of here, she remarked. These will have to be turned quickly. I doubt we can force them to join us without thoroughly breaking them. She turned toward Rayla. You will have to be turned first, she remarked. It's not going to be pleasant, but you'll thank us once it's done. She reached out her hand, and Rayla felt something touch her brain. No! The scream inside her head wasn't her own. Rayla dropped her father to the ground. Screaming, she felt her knee clutching her head as something forced channels within her brain she hadn't known were there to abruptly rip open. Instantly, she could see 3 sources of light inside her brain, one blue, one green, one a bright, fiery red. The voice inside her head opened herself up to the blue light, which instantly filled with her mind with a high-pitched lyrical music. It wove a blast of fire. It formed a red energy lines at Gedwin, who leaped backward and sliced the fireball out of the air with his own power. Somehow she could see how he formed it, green and red flows merging together into a knife-like construct. Whatever it was had awakened something in her mind and snapped some sort of block formed of golden energy around the man. There was resistance, as if she were pushing against something invisible. However, she adjusted the shape, sharpening the construct to a razor edge. It sliced through whatever was stopping her, cutting through something within the Sora up. Eyes bulging, Gedwin screamed and dropped to his knees, clutching his head in both hands. Bayora stared at the man, looking horrified. Then she attacked. Her own block construct formed in an instant, shooting toward Rayla. Pathetic, the voice said quietly, forming 3 distinct constructs. The first sliced through the block, the second formed into a rain of fiery ribbons toward the enemy, but the third was changed in a way that made it vaguely translucent to Rayla's eyes. Reacting quickly, Bayora sliced the ribbons out of the air. Only her knife construct was formed from blue and white energy. Then the third construct was unleashed. A line of red light bursting close to Bayora. The woman turned, somewhat surprised, then screamed as the light exploded upward in a rapidly expanding pillar of flame, vaporizing the woman in an instant. Rayla tried to wrestle whatever it was as the taking control of her, but the thing refused to relent. The crossbowmen fired into the crowd, but Rayla destroyed the bolts with bursts of fire. Even the heads melted in the abrupt, violent heat. Then the voice turned its attention toward the crossbowmen. They only had enough time to turn and start hasty retreat before red and green lines of power shot from her hands. Instantly, the men exploded in a haze of blood and flesh. Just exploded. Rayla gagged and emptied her stomach at the horrified sight of the men lying in pieces on the ground, ichor spreading from their mangled bodies. Why can't I move? The voice screamed in her head. I have to help, to save these people. No, Rayla whispered. Stop this. What you're doing is evil. The voice paused, then vanished, and her connection to blue light abruptly released. Breath coming in and out rapidly, she looked around at the other people. The arbitrarily selected men were nursing their necks, and the women just looked shell-shocked. Everyone else was staring at her with horrified expressions on their faces. The worst was her father. He looked up at her from where she dropped him, his eyes displaying disgust and revulsion, and behind that, terror. No, she whispered, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. Her voice rose to a yell, it wasn't me. She turned and ran out of the building, into the chaotic city beyond.